In this video, you're going to see how to create a rack of baby back ribs that have been smoked for 5 hours. It's a pretty simple process that's going to allow you to create a consistent rib every time that you go to make your ribs, so that you know what to expect when you get them off the smoker, and your guests can expect the same thing every time they eat your ribs. So again, this is a 5-hour smoked baby back rib recipe. I'm going to walk you through each step of how to create these ribs, so that you can be able to create the perfect rib for your barbecue every time. So my first step in creating the 5-hour baby back smoked ribs is to basically just lay the ribs out. First note is that these ribs came from a butcher shop. I know exactly where these ribs came from. It helps me know that the ribs I'm eating I'm at least getting meat that is produced in a sustainable way, and that the ribs are of good quality and they're not pre-frozen. The first thing that I do when I lay the ribs out is I tear the membrane off the back. I just basically go in there with a butter knife and run the butter knife underneath the edge, lift it up, and it'll start pulling away. If you do this with a fresh back of baby back ribs that has not been pre-frozen, it makes your life a lot easier. That membrane's going to come off no problem. I find that if you try to do it with those pre-packaged frozen pieces of garbage, that job becomes a lot more difficult. Anyways, that's just my opinion and my experience. Once I've done that, I'm going to take the rub that I have, and you can check out our rub recipe by looking at the other videos we have on the Pole Smash Backyard Barbecue series and looking for Pappy's Pappy's Pork Rub recipe is what it's called. Anyways, I take 2 tablespoons of that and I'll rub it on the back side of the ribs, and I'm just basically evenly coating the ribs. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of the pork rub recipe, and I'm going to just throw it on the ribs, and I'm going to smooth it out so that all the entire surface of the rubs is coated nice and evenly. So that meat look delicious. Now some people, what they'll do is they'll let that rub sit on the ribs overnight in the refrigerator and kind of soak into the rib as almost a dry brine. Other people will give that rack of ribs almost a deep tissue massage and really rub the rub into the rib. I happen to just like to pat it down. That's what has worked for me. Just make sure everything's evenly coated. You can obviously experiment with the different methods that I just suggested to you to find out which is going to give you the rib that you feel is best. Again, this is just something that works best for me. So feel free to throw the rub in the refrigerator overnight on the rib. Feel free to massage it in with more aggressiveness than that I do, or just pat it down and cover it evenly at the very least. Now once I've done that, my ribs are ready to go on the smoker. I'll let those ribs sit room temperature for about 10 minutes. The smoker's been warming up. It should be about 220 degrees right now. I can count on this old trusty beat up smoker. I know exactly how it operates. I come in and I throw the ribs on the smoker. Now I do this with very little smoke. I throw just a small handful of apple chips on there. I do it right at the beginning, and I do it at right about the hour mark. I'll throw another small handful of apple chips on there. That's all I do. You do not want to over smoke your ribs. Do not use tons and tons of chips or tons and tons of blocks for your ribs. Just a little bit of smoke to give it a little bit of a smoked flavor, in my opinion. Very easy to over smoke ribs and ruin the taste. It's very easy to destroy them that way. So it'll still taste good even if it's under smoked technically. What you're looking for is a blue smoke to come out. So after 2 hours, I'll come back. This is what the ribs will look like. After 2 hours, I've not opened the lid for any reason whatsoever. This is what my ribs look like. And in 2 hours, what I do is I put them into foil. This is called a Texas crutch. It's not a necessary step. it's the step that I've become accustomed to that I think works wonders, and you'll see why in just a second when we come back 2 hours later and I open up this foil. But so essentially the method is 2 hours on the smoker without the foil. Then after 2 hours I come and I wrap it nice and tightly in the foil, which is again called the Texas Crutch. And what this allows to do is all the moisture from the ribs really stays in there. And the ribs soak up that moisture, and it keeps holding that moisture, and it almost steams the ribs to a degree without losing the quality of the meat. Then, after 2 hours, so this would be 4 hours total, I come back, open up my ribs, and you can see how there's all that steam in there, and those ribs are sitting on a pile of juice that they've created. Otherwise, that juice would have dripped out into the pan that's below, the pan that should be full of water, by the way. So I take that and I'll dump the juice from that onto the ribs, and I'll put the ribs back onto the grill without the foil now. So the final hour of smoking, the ribs will be out of the foil. This will be hour number 5. And I basically just leave them here for about a half an hour untouched. This is again what the ribs look like. And in about half an hour, what I do is I come back, and if I'm going to sauce the ribs at all, this is the time that I'll throw some sauce on. I basically here I've got a Memphis sauce that again we have the recipe for on the Backyard Barbecue series, and I lightly coat this this rack with the Memphis style sauce. If you're not going to use sauce, obviously you skip this step and just leave the ribs on there for the remainder of the hour. Otherwise, come in here and give it a good liberal coating. Make sure that the ribs are getting really drowned in that sauce, because you almost can't go too heavy here because that sauce is really going to soak in, and it's not going to be dripping off when you take them off the grill and go to serve them. But the sauce will finish almost providing a nice layer around the ribs. I don't want to call it a crust, but it will provide a nice juicy, almost glue-like layer around the ribs that makes for a very nice finishing. So I do this a half an hour before I'm finished with the ribs. And about 15 minutes later, 15 minutes before the ribs are finished, I come back, open it up, and I slather on just another light helping of the sauce. Once I've done that, I cover the ribs back up for 15 minutes. And the ribs at that point are done. I no longer have to worry about smoking them. I unplug my smoker. I'll pull the ribs off after the 15 minutes are up. 5 hours total, and they're ready to put on a plate. So this is what they look like after 5 hours of smoking. Put them on a plate. They're ready to eat. You can serve the sauce of your choice next to it, so that people can make the ribs wetter if you would like for them to do that. Those are our 5-hour baby back smoked ribs. I think if you do this, you're going to find that on a consistent basis, you're going to produce a rib that you're going to enjoy and that your guests are going to enjoy. You can't really go wrong with this recipe. It's a foolproof recipe, so to speak. At this point, I'd like to invite you to check out the other recipes we have on our Backyard Barbecue series. So follow us here on YouTube and check out the Backyard Barbecue series playlist that we have going on. There you're going to find a whole bunch of great recipes that will help you create a gigantic backyard barbecue for your family or friends this summer. Also, we have a link below where you can go to polesmash.com and vote on your favorite style barbecue.